The Second Punic War was a huge clash between two worlds, Rome and Carthage. It wasn't just a fight for land, but for total control of the Mediterranean Sea, a young, ambitious republic against a mighty sea empire. Rome, just starting its journey to greatness, challenged Carthage, a power with a rich history and a strong navy. At the heart of this epic conflict are figures who became legends. Their names are forever etched in humanity's memory. On one side there's Hannibal Barca, the embodiment of Carthaginian revenge and military genius. His childhood was spent in his great father's shadow, where he swore to hate Rome. His name is a symbol of daring and brilliance. Crossing the Alps, battles that shook Rome, all became part of his legend. Hannibal became a true ghost for Rome, a name spoken with worry. His shadow fell over every home, making Romans live in constant fear of disaster. Against him stood an entire people, the whole Roman Republic. Their strength came from unity, discipline, and belief in their destiny. The Republic produced generals like Scipio Africanus, a man who turned Hannibal's genius against him. He didn't defend Italy, he went further. Scipio took the war to African soil, to where Carthage's power began. He understood, Hannibal could only be defeated on his home ground by taking away his support, breaking his confidence, striking at the very heart of his people. At the Battle of Zama, Scipio used not force, but smarts. He studied the enemy's tactics, figured out the movements of the war elephants, and ordered his troops to open their ranks for them. By doing this, he took away Hannibal's main weapon of fear. Scipio wasn't just a soldier, he was a strategist of a new era. He showed how Roman discipline could defeat Carthaginian obsession. So the Republic beat Hannibal not on the battlefield but in their minds, and with that, they ended the legend of his unbeatable genius. The story of the Second Punic War is a duel between a person and a system, a clash of beliefs where every decision changed the fate of civilizations. We remember Hannibal's elephants crossing the Alps, a symbol of the impossible overcome by human will. Every step on those icy paths was a test where weakness meant death. In these mountains, not only glory but also despair was born, as even the strongest doubted victory. People died from the cold, animals fell into ravines, and Hannibal marched ahead, blindly believing that his destiny lay beyond these mountains. He lost almost half his army, but he crossed, and with that one act, he became a living legend before striking the first blow against Rome, and the Romans trembled because the enemy came from a place no one should have come from. We remember the Battle of Cannae, the day Rome almost fell, but it was then that its toughness showed. On the plains of Apulia, two armies met, 80,000 Romans against 50,000 Carthaginians, but it wasn't numbers that decided it. It was smarts, it was tactics. Hannibal set up his soldiers in a crescent shape. The center was weak, the flanks were strong. When the Romans attacked head-on and pushed in the center, the flanks closed in. Rome's army was completely surrounded. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Tens of thousands died. In one day, Rome lost more soldiers than ever before. The Senate was in a panic. All roads to Rome were open, but that's when Roman toughness was born. They didn't give up. They didn't ask for peace. They rose up, not for revenge, but for survival. It was a day of defeat, but it was on that day that Rome began to truly learn how to win. Rome started as a small town on the Tiber River. It slowly grew into a strong republic of farmer soldiers. Its strength came from being organized, brave, and wanting to grow. Carthage, on the other hand, was built by the Phoenicians as a trading post on the coast of North Africa. It quickly became a very rich sea power, controlling all the trade routes in the western Mediterranean. These two powers were bound to compete. Rome wanted to rule the land, and Carthage wanted to rule the sea. Their interests clashed in Sicily, which led to the First Punic War. Rome, which didn't have a navy, built one from scratch and won. This made Carthage lose not only the island, but also some of its power. Losing the war was a big blow to Carthage, and the peace was only a short break. Tensions grew in both societies, and a new generation was getting ready for revenge. Two different systems, two worlds. Their clash was becoming more and more unavoidable. But even though they were different, both civilizations had amazing achievements in how they governed, fought wars, and created culture. Their fight not only decided what would happen in the Mediterranean, but also set the stage for future empires. After their defeat, Carthage started looking for new ways to get its power back, and Rome made itself stronger, getting ready for new challenges. So began a new chapter in history, where the hopes, fears, and big plans of two great peoples got all tangled up in fate. During this time, The military leaders in Carthage became more powerful. They wanted revenge and to get back the respect they had lost. In Rome, the Senate and the people came together to protect the Republic and make it bigger. Slowly, both powers realized that their future depended on who won an even bigger war. The Romans felt more and more that they had a special job in history and needed to protect the lands they had conquered. The Carthaginians, on their part, looked for new friends and resources to get back the power they had lost. They didn't trust each other, and remembering past hurts only made things more tense, making the peace between the two powers very fragile. After losing the First Punic War, Carthage looked to Spain. It was a land full of silver, warriors, and new chances to get even. Here, among the misty hills and tough tribes, Hannibal Barca started building for the next war, and his son Hannibal turned Spain into a training ground for his army. Hannibal didn't just conquer cities. He also made friends with the local tribes, turning them into loyal helpers. He trained his soldiers very carefully, mixing Carthaginian order with the fierce spirit of the Iberian warriors. In 219 BC, Hannibal attacked Saguntum, a city that Rome had promised to protect. This attack wasn't just a military move, it was a direct challenge to Rome itself, a sign of the big storm coming. This is how the Second Punic War began, a war that would change the Mediterranean forever. In the glow of campfires and the rumble of siege machines, Hannibal made his soldiers tough, getting them ready for a huge journey over the Alps. The Romans watched with worry, knowing their enemy was getting stronger and bolder. Each day of the siege brought them closer to the moment when the two great powers would clash in a deadly fight. In Spain, a legend was being born that would change history forever. In the workshops of Carthage and under the trees of Iberia, weapons were being made that would soon be covered in blood. The leaders of the local tribes had to choose between sticking to old ways and the lure of new friendships. At this time in Rome, senators argued about how to deal with the growing threat, not knowing how close a huge storm was. In every camp, in every city, you could feel the tension building, like the very ground was holding its breath before the coming storm. Winds of change brought a feeling of disaster, and even the most experienced warriors couldn't guess what tomorrow would bring. Spain became the stage where the fates of empires got tangled up, and no one could stop the coming fight. 218 BC, the Second Punic War. The Roman Republic felt unbeatable, their armies ready for a quick win. But in Carthage, a bold plan was brewing. Hannibal, a young and ambitious general, decided to do the impossible, strike at the very heart of the enemy where no one expected him. Instead of playing defense, he led his army, foot soldiers, cavalry, and even war elephants across the Pyrenees and the snowy Alps. This was a path considered crazy and deadly. Hannibal risked everything, his army, his reputation, the future of Carthage. People at the time were shocked and confused. No one had ever dared such a thing before. For the Romans, it seemed insane. For the Carthaginians, it was their last hope. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. Hannibal challenged the impossible to change history. His army marched where no enemy had ever set foot, overcoming fear, cold, and hunger. Through these incredibly tough challenges, the army and Hannibal himself grew stronger. In the icy winds and dark nights, a new strength was born, uniting the warriors as one. After 15 days of pure misery, the worn-out, exhausted remains of Hannibal's army finally made it out of the freezing Alps. For the first time, they saw the plains of Po. Before them lay a hostile but inviting land, where the fate of the war would be decided. Hannibal led his army right to the enemy's doorstep, but the journey had cost them dearly. Almost half the army was gone, and all the elephants were left behind in the mountains. The soldiers were worn out, their faces filled with worry and tiredness, but there was no time to rest. They needed a quick win to get the Gauls on their side. Hannibal scared the region by destroying the capital of the Taurini, showing how determined he was. Blood was spilled for the first time, and this was just the beginning. The Gauls, amazed by the Carthaginians' boldness, started joining his side. Panic spread in the Roman camp. Scipio rushed to Italy, gathered his legions, and got ready to face the enemy. It was November of 218 BC. Cold, fear, and tension filled both camps. By the Ticinus River, the first battle cry rang out. Hannibal's cavalry quickly attacked the Romans. A whirlwind of hooves, cries of the wounded, blood on the snow. Scipio was badly hurt and the Romans were in chaos. This was Hannibal's first victory on Italian soil. The idea that Rome couldn't be beaten cracked for the first time. Roman soldiers retreated, their faith shaken, and their fear of this new enemy grew. The Gauls switched sides to Carthage in large numbers, and Hannibal's army grew. Scipio had to pull back, leaving the battlefield to the enemy. Rome, in desperation, called for a second army led by Sempronius Longus. Everything was ready for the first big battle. Tension filled the air, and fear and determination showed on the soldiers' faces. Ahead lay the clash between Rome's strict order and Hannibal's brilliant mind. At this moment, the fate of Italy hung in the balance. The Second Punic War was a test of cleverness and cruelty, and nowhere was this clearer than in the trap at Trebia. In the freezing cold of winter, Hannibal tricked the Roman army into crossing the icy Trebia River, making them fight while wet and shivering. Hidden in the fog were Carthaginian cavalry and foot soldiers ready to ambush. As the Romans moved forward, Hannibal's troops attacked from the sides and behind, trapping the Roman soldiers in a deadly squeeze. The result was a bloodbath. Thousands of Romans died, their screams lost in the winter air, and Hannibal's smart planning shone through the sadness of war. The river itself seemed to be against the Romans, taking away their strength and hope as they struggled through the icy water. The clang of metal and the thunder of hooves echoed across the plain, making a grim song of defeat. After the battle, the snow was stained with blood, and the survivors carried with them the horror of Hannibal's unstoppable plan. The defeat at Trebia shook Rome, making citizens and commanders lose confidence. News of the disaster spread quickly, making fear and doubt grow throughout the Republic. But for Hannibal, this was just the start of a campaign that would test how much Rome could take. The memory of Trebia would haunt the Romans, reminding them of the price of underestimating an enemy. The drums of war got louder, showing the worry that took over the heart of Rome. The legend of Hannibal grew with every Roman soldier who fell, his name whispered with fear across the land. The tragedy got worse at Lake Trasimene, where Hannibal set another deadly trap. While the Roman army marched along the misty shore, Carthaginian warriors hid in the hills, quiet and unseen. At Hannibal's signal, the trap snapped shut. The Carthaginians rushed down, cutting off escape routes and throwing the Romans into chaos. The ambush was complete. The Roman column was crushed, many drowned in the lake trying to escape. These battles, full of tension and brutal planning, showed the terrible cost of war and the brilliance and sadness of Hannibal's campaign. The morning mist became a shroud for those doomed, muffling the screams and confusion as the Roman lines fell apart. Panic took over the soldiers, their order breaking down under the force of terror and surprise. In the end, the waters of Lake Trasimene became silent witnesses to the death of another Roman army, and the world trembled from the shadow Hannibal's name cast. The defeat at Lake Trasimene further broke Roman morale, leaving the Republic in shock from a series of disasters. Stories from survivors about the ambush haunted the Senate, leading to urgent calls for new plans and leaders. Hannibal's skill in tricking and using the land again changed the rules of ancient warfare. The hills around Lake Trasimene echoed with the moans of the defeated, their hopes drowned under the force of Carthaginian weapons. Nature itself, wrapped in mist and silence, seemed to mourn, turning away from the bloodshed. Rome's enemies cheered, feeling the weakness of the giant, brought down by the art of war. After the disaster at Lake Trasimene, Rome, gripped by fear, appointed Fabius Maximus as dictator. His plan was to avoid big battles, wear down Hannibal by messing with his supplies, and not give him a chance for a big fight. But the Romans were proud and desperate for revenge. So, under the command of consuls Paulus and Varro, they gathered the biggest army the Republic had ever seen. In August of 216 BC, the two armies met on the plains of Cannae. The Romans lined up in a tight group, hoping to crush the enemy with their numbers and brute force. Hannibal, guessing their plan, set up his army in a curve. The Carthaginian foot soldiers were in the middle, and the African heavy foot soldiers and horsemen were on the sides. He tricked the Romans into a trap by letting his middle line give way under their attack. The Romans, feeling good about their push, kept going deeper, not realizing they were being surrounded from the sides. The African foot soldiers closed the circle, and the Carthaginian horsemen attacked from behind. Then came the massacre. The Romans were so packed together they couldn't fight or even run away. In just a few hours, up to 70,000 people died, including consuls, senators, and the best of Rome's rich families. The news of the defeat shocked the ancient world. Cannae became a symbol of military genius and tragedy, a perfect example of a crushing defeat. Hannibal was at the top of his game, but Rome didn't give up. The city even banned mourning so people wouldn't lose hope. The Senate put together new armies, even using slaves and gladiators, and made weapons from temple gifts, getting ready for a long fight. The war turned into a long, tiring struggle. Rome learned to be patient, to wait, and not to give up, even when facing the biggest disaster. And we'll tell you about the epic continuation of this war, the legendary end of Hannibal Barca's life, and the results of the war for both states in our next video. Hit the bell so you don't miss it, and subscribe to our channel. There's a lot more interesting stuff coming your way, friends. Bye for now.